Now, I want to take a look at this story. A Kent County councillor has apologised after his colleagues held a sweepstake on when Labour would bring up the cut to universal credit in a recent council meeting. Karen Constantine, a Labour councillor for Ramsgate, was speaking at a KCC meeting last month when she said she heard groaning, guffawing and chuckling from her Conservative colleagues.
And I just wondered what this committee and what your thoughts are about the cut to universal credit of £20 a week, which is going to force a lot of families into poverty. I can hear my colleagues groaning, but really this is about prevention being better than cure, and what we do now stores up enormous problems for the future.
Thank you. Karen, the reason why you had collective groans was because some colleagues have lost the sweepstake as to when the £20 universal credit would be mentioned at this meeting.
I wonder how many of my colleagues have spent time in food banks or visited the kitchens of people where the cupboards are actually bare, and then we wonder why we've got an eating disorder epidemic.
Let's have the answers on the...
Well, we heard Paul Bartlett in that clip. He's now issued a statement saying he very much regrets what he said. Paul, with us in a moment. First, let's talk to Karen from Labour, who's with us on the line. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. What was going through your mind when you got to speak and then you heard, as you described it, the groans and the comments about a sweepstake?
Well, thanks for having me on and thanks for giving me the opportunity to explain that. Well, yes, I was absolutely flabbergasted, actually, and very baffled because I've been on that committee for over 4 years. I consider myself to be something of an expert in the field of health because it's been part of my background. I attend well prepared, well researched, and I try to make pertinent points, you know, because that's the business of that committee. I take that workload very, very seriously. So to find people sort of sniggering at you like overgrown schoolboys in a badly behaved classroom was really like a throwback to the 70s. I wasn't very happy at all because what I was raising was the voice of the people in my community that are the most disadvantaged and the ones that are struggling so much, and I felt it was wholly inappropriate. Okay, so what does it make you feel like in terms of other politicians, that whether opposition or otherwise, who do you feel they're not in touch with what people? I feel that a lot of my counterparts are not in touch, and I think this is best evidenced when we had to take the local health authority to court over the closure of the stroke unit. People didn't basically want to understand that Thanet was, you know, on a peninsula with the highest rate of strokes in the county and was going to be furthest away from a stroke unit. So I sort of predicate my arguments on that. But generally speaking, some of my Conservative councillors, colleagues, not all, are very out of touch with what's happening in our poorer, more disadvantaged homes. Is this typical, though, the comments that you experience in those council meetings? Look, there is a bit of cut and thrust that goes on. That's the nature of politics. But this was outside of that. This was unusual. This was... I found it kind of quite misogynistic towards me as well. Right. So I thought, here I am making a sensible comment here. We're talking about eating disorders. We're talking about a rise in mental health. We're talking about poor physical health. And at the same time, we're cutting the universal credit uplift to those families that are the poorest, the most vulnerable. We just heard that apology from Paul. Are you happy with the apology? I haven't received that apology yet. I've heard of it. I don't know whether it's landed in my email box, I have to be honest. But we are going to raise this at full county council. We do want to take a motion forward. We do think there's more to this. We do think there is a culture in KCC of not really addressing these issues properly. And these issues and our role as Labour councillors and our role as women councillors are not to be demeaned by being laughed at. It's very simple, really. Stay with us. Paul Bartlett is Conservative Kent County Councillor who was chairing that meeting, who we're talking about here in terms of chairing, where the sweepstake about universal credit was held. I mean, you heard Karen talk about an apology there. Do you want to make one?
Yes, Karen, and to anybody listening, I want to make a full and sincere apology. I absolutely did not mean anything in the comments, and I have the utmost sympathy for anyone who is struggling financially, and I do regret the comments that were made. I'd like to go further and just say that if there is any views that the committee acted like overgrown schoolboys and we were sniggering and there's a misogynist culture, I'm deeply sorry for any offence that we've given. and I will do my absolute utmost to ensure that it's not repeated and will behave in a professional way in the future.
I know, to be fair, there was a conversation before we aired this programme tonight about not being there together, necessarily having a conversation together on the air, but actually you are. So I just ask you, Karen, do you accept that?
I accept some of it. I would have to be honest with you, I'd have to listen again and give it some thought.
Well, you just heard Paul Bartlett fully apologise, and he also said
for his comments.
Okay.
For his comments. So my point actually is about the culture and the organisation. Paul wasn't responsible for the sniggering and the laughter that took place. Paul presumably wasn't responsible for the sweepstake, and I think we need to look into that. Were my Tory council colleagues running a sweepstake? Because they seem to have a joke about very poor people, which I wasn't in on. Okay,
Paul Bartlett, I asked you that question from me about the sweepstake. Who thought that was a good idea to even have one on such a sensitive issue?
Let me be absolutely clear. There was no sweepstake. I spoke ill-advisedly in making that comment. Karen made a reference to the cut and thrust of politics. I spoke in a jocular way, which I absolutely should not have done, and I deeply regret it. Karen, I'm sorry of any offence that I've created. And if there is a culture of schoolboys and sniggering in KCC, I'm absolutely with you in eradicating that. We've got a serious job coming up. Karen has mentioned the HOSC review of the HASUs, that's the hyperacute stroke units. There are health outcome issues in Thanet and the rest of the county, which we as a committee need to work together to resolve. We've got the thorny issue of the A&E potentially under threat in both Thanet and in Ashford, and it's absolutely vital that we all work together to get the best outcome for our residents. And I want to work with you, Karen, and the rest of your team in order to achieve the best outcome for the whole of Kent.
Paul Bartlett, Conservative Kent County Councillor, with us on the programme tonight, who chaired that meeting. Just out of interest, would you be interested in spending a day with someone on universal credit? I just spoke to someone in Canterbury a short time ago, would you let us follow you on BBC Radio Kent just to have that real close connection? Just something a bit different, just throwing it in there.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Okay, let's get that sorted. I think that would just be a really interesting thing to get real sort of on the ground feeling about these issues that as chair, I guess you could spread to the rest of those with you. Karen Constantine, just final word from you, just to react.
That would be willing to do that. I mean, what I want is a reassurance that this won't be repeated, that there will be some sort of investigation, because the cynical part of my brain says, oh, well, this is now being viewed 127,000 times on Twitter. So, of course, there is going to be some sort of damage limitation, many weeks after the event.
Do you? I'm just going to just to push you on that. Do you not accept Councillor Paul Bartlett being genuine there?
I do accept that he was genuine in what he's just
said.
So
he has apologised for that to move it forward. So but
it is many weeks after the actual event, isn't it?
But
and after it's been viewed so many times on Twitter. But I would like to introduce Paul Bartlett to some of the people that those comments were made about. Those comments were referenced to.
You heard him here say he'd accept our invitation to be part of that. Maybe you could go together. Now there's a cross-party, across the floor thing going.
Why not, eh?
There you go. Why not? There you go. Both together, all together, and we make a point, don't we, sometimes, of just saying, look, it happened. Let's try and get together to move it on. Thank you both. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Paul Bartlett, Conservative Kent County Councillor, and also we heard from Labour's Karen Constantine on that story here on BBC Radio Kent tonight.